The Mafia boss said, "Everyone has a price." I handed him $1. "Here's yours, now leave my sister alone." The last lie I told myself was that I could protect Mia from everything if I just worked hard enough. The fluorescent lights in St. Mary's Hospital emergency department had a way of turning everyone into ghosts. I finished my 16th hour on shift with blood on my scrubs that wasn't mine, and exhaustion that was. My hands moved through the motions: dispose of gloves, sanitize, chart the laceration, repair on a construction worker who'd been more worried about losing the day's pay than losing the finger, while my mind was already 3 subway stops away, where Mia was supposedly studying for her sociology midterm. Supposedly, because my 18-year-old sister had developed a talent for being exactly where she said she'd be on paper, while her body learned to lie in 3 dimensions. Our parents had been dead 3 years. A car accident on the interstate that turned 2 people into a statistic and 2 daughters into a mathematics problem. How do you divide love by loss and still come out with something that looks like a future? I became the answer by default. At 25, I traded my nursing school loans for double shifts. Our childhood home for a 2-bedroom walk-up in a neighborhood where the rent was cheap because hope was cheaper. And any dream of my own life for the singular mission of making sure Mia got hers. I clocked out at 11:42 and took the subway home with my head against the window, watching the city blur into smears of light that looked like water if you squinted. My phone buzzed twice. The first message was from Mia, studying late at campus library. "Be home by midnight. Love you." The second was from my charge nurse. "You're scheduled for another double tomorrow. Can you take it?" I typed yes before my brain could negotiate with my body. Money was a language I'd learned to speak fluently in the dialect of never enough. The apartment building looked tired in the way old things do when they've given up apologizing for their age. I climbed 3 flights of stairs because the elevator had been broken since August and the landlord had been ignoring phone calls since September. At the door, I fumbled for keys, and that's when I heard the voices in the stairwell below. Young, male, and sharp with the kind of laughter that comes before someone gets hurt. I froze with the key half-turned in the lock. She said she'd meet me. "Not you." The first voice carried an edge wrapped in silk. Money voice. Private school vows that had never met a consequence they couldn't buy their way out of. "She texted me too, Vitale. So either your girl is playing games, or you're the one getting played." This voice was different. Colder, flatter. The kind that made you think of winter and basements and things that don't come back. Vitale. I knew that name. Everyone in this city knew that name if they had any sense of self-preservation. The Vitales ran the north side like a private kingdom, and crossing them was a creative form of suicide. Call her your girl again, Russo, and see what happens. Russo, the other crime family. The ones who ran the docks and the gambling and had a body count that made the evening news treat their name like a profanity that had to be bleeped. My hands tightened on the doorknob. Mia's name hovered in the air between them like a third person I wanted to strangle. I yanked the door open and moved back into the stairwell with my exhaustion converting into something sharper. 2 men stood 3 steps apart on the landing below. One in a leather jacket that cost more than my monthly rent, dark curls and a smile that looked like a warning label, and the other in black on black with pale eyes that didn't blink enough to be fully human. "Gentlemen," I said, and the word came out like an accusation. "This building has a no loitering policy. Also a no whatever the hell this is policy." The one in leather, Luca Vitale, I realized. Because I'd seen his face on the news next to his older brothers during some charity gala, where rich men pretended their money wasn't blood-soaked. Looked up with surprise that melted into something else. Appraisal, maybe. Amusement. "You must be the sister," he said, and his grin was all teeth. "Mia talks about you." "Mia talks too much," I said, "and to the wrong people." The pale-eyed one, Marco Russo, because of course it was, tilted his head. "She doesn't seem to think we're wrong. She seems to think we're very right. She's 18, I said, descending 2 steps so I could meet them at eye level, so they could see I wasn't scared even though my pulse was a drum solo against my ribs. "Which means she's an idiot. You're both older, which means you have no excuse." 21 isn't that much older, Luca said, still smiling. "And I really like her. This isn't a game." "Everything's a game to people like you," I said. "And my sister isn't a prize you get to win." Either of you. Marco moved then, just a slight shift of weight, but it was enough to make my spine remember every self-defense class I'd taken at the Y. People like us? He repeated softly. You don't know anything about people like us. I know enough, I said. I know your families have been killing each other for decades. I know anyone caught between you ends up as a headline. I know my sister isn't going to be that headline. The stairwell went quiet, except for the distant sound of someone's television bleeding through the walls. A sitcom laugh track that felt obscene in its normalcy. Luca's smile faded. I won't let anything happen to her. You can't promise that, I said. Not with your last name. Neither can he, Marco said, gesturing at Luca with the casual contempt of someone who'd been born knowing how to make enemies. Which is why both of you need to stay away from her, I said. And I let every hour of exhaustion, every shift spent holding together people who'd been broken by the city's violence, every nightmare about Mia ending up on a gurney in my own emergency department, bleed into my voice. She's not part of your world. She doesn't want to be, and I won't let you pull her into it just because you're bored or lonely or proving something to each other. She wants... Luca started. She's a kid. I cut him off. She wants lots of things. Doesn't mean she gets them. I turned and walked back up the stairs, my legs shaking with adrenaline I couldn't afford to show. Behind me, I heard Marco say something too low to catch, and Luca's response was a curse. I unlocked my door, stepped inside, and locked every deadbolt we had, which was 3 because the previous tenant had been either paranoid or realistic depending on your perspective. The apartment was empty. Mia's door hung open, her room a disaster of textbooks and discarded outfits, her bed still made from this morning. The library text had been a lie. Of course it had. I called her. It went to voicemail. I called again. Same. I texted. Where are you? Not a question. A demand. 3 minutes passed, then 5, then 10. My phone finally buzzed. Campus coffee shop. Sorry, phone died. Charging now. Home soon, promise. I stared at the words and tried to decide if they were true. Truth had become a slippery thing between us, something that changed shape depending on who was looking at it and what they needed it to be. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table with cold coffee and tried to calculate how many more shifts I'd need to move us somewhere safer. Somewhere with doormen and security cameras, and a landlord who fixed things. The math didn't work. It never worked. Mia came home at 12:45 smelling like expensive cologne and lies. She looked at me sitting in the dark and sighed. Elle, you didn't have to wait up. 2 boys were in our stairwell tonight, I said. Fighting over you. Do you know who they are? Her face did something complicated. They weren't fighting. They were about to, I said. Mia, the Vitales, and the Russos. I know who they are, she said, and there was something in her voice I didn't recognize. Defiance, maybe, or the beginning of the kind of stupid that gets people killed. Luca's not like that. He's sweet. He wants to go to law school. He wants out of the family business. And Marco? I asked. She looked away. Marco's persistent. That's not an answer, I said. He wants to take me to dinner. To meet his father. He says I could... She stopped. Could what? I asked, my blood turning to ice water. Be his trophy? His way of sticking it to the Vitales? Do you understand what you've gotten yourself into? I haven't gotten into anything, she snapped. They like me. Is that so hard to believe? That someone might actually want me? The words landed between us like something dropped from a height. I stood slowly. This isn't about whether you're worth wanting, I said, and my voice cracked on the edges. This is about you being safe. These men, their families, Mia, people die. People disappear. I can't lose you. Her eyes filled, but she blinked it back. You won't, she said. I'm not stupid, Elle. I can handle myself. You're 18, I said again, because it was the only argument I had left. Mom was 19 when she had you, Mia said quietly. You don't get to treat me like a child when I'm older than she was. She went to her room and closed the door. I stood in the kitchen and felt the apartment walls press in around me like a fist. The next day passed in a blur of IV insertions and medication, reconciliations and a pediatric code that ended well but left me shaking in the supply closet for 5 minutes afterward. I came home to find Mia already in her room, door closed, music playing too loud. I knocked. She didn't answer. I tried to sleep and couldn't. Every sound in the building became a threat. Footsteps in the hall, voices in the stairwell, the building's ancient pipes groaning like something dying slowly. Around 2 a.m, my phone lit the dark. Unknown number. I answered because nurses learn not to ignore unknown numbers. Hello? Miss Elena Santos. The voice was male, older than the boys from the stairwell, and carried the kind of authority that made you sit up straighter even when you were alone. I apologize for the late hour. My name is Dante Vitale. My mouth went dry. Dante Vitale wasn't just a name. He was the name. The head of the Vitale family. The man the newspapers called the most dangerous person in the city when they were being polite and other things when they weren't. I'm calling about your sister and my brother, he continued when I didn't speak. I think we should meet. No, I said. I'm sorry? No, I repeated. We have nothing to discuss. Your brother needs to leave Mia alone. That's not a conversation. That's a fact. There was a pause. Then something that might have been a laugh. I like you already, he said. But this isn't a request, Miss Santos. Tomorrow, 6 p.m. I'll send a car. I have a shift until 7, I said. I'll send a car at 7:15, he said, unbothered. Don't make me come to you. It attracts attention neither of us want. The line went dead. I sat in the dark and felt the world rearrange itself into something that had teeth. The next evening, I stood outside the hospital at 7:16 and watched a black town car pull up with the kind of inevitability usually reserved for natural disasters. The driver got out, opened the rear door, and said nothing, because men who work for people like Dante Vitale learn that silence is a survival skill. I got in because refusing would have only delayed the inevitable, and made me look like I thought I had a choice. The drive took 20 minutes through neighborhoods that got progressively cleaner, richer, more hostile to anyone without the right last name or bank balance. We pulled up to a building that looked like it had been stolen from a European city and reassembled here brick by brick. The doorman didn't ask questions. The penthouse elevator required a key. The driver used it and retreated. I rode up 40 floors alone, watching my reflection in the polished brass doors. Wrinkled scrubs, hair in a bun that had given up structural integrity around hour 12, dark circles under my eyes that makeup couldn't fix anymore. The elevator opened directly into an apartment that looked like an architectural magazine had a baby with a crime film. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the city spread out like scattered jewels. The furniture was all clean lines and dark leather, and the kind of money that didn't bother showing off because it didn't have to. 3 men stood in the living room. I recognized Luca immediately. Next to him stood Marco Russo, which made my spine lock, because crime families didn't share space unless they were negotiating or about to start shooting. The third man stood apart, and I understood immediately why people followed him into hell and called it leadership. Dante Vitale looked like he'd been designed by someone who wanted to test the limits of what a human face could do to a nervous system. Tall, dark suit that fit like it had been born on him. Hair swept back with the kind of careless precision that takes effort to achieve, and eyes that looked black in the low light. But it was the way he held himself that made my breath catch. Absolute stillness. Absolute control, like a blade at rest. Miss Santos, he said, and his voice matched the rest of him. Dark, smooth, expensive. Thank you for coming. I didn't have a choice, I said, because if we were doing this, we were going to be honest about what it was. His mouth moved. Not quite a smile. No, he agreed. You didn't. Please sit. I'll stand, I said. Suit yourself. He moved to the bar, poured something amber into a glass, and turned back. I'll be direct. Your sister has become a problem. The room went sharp around the edges. Excuse me? Not her, he clarified. The situation she's created. My brother has developed feelings for her. Marco Russo has developed an obsession with her. The 2 boys nearly came to violence in your stairwell, which means this situation will escalate. People will die. I'd prefer they not be family. Tell your brother to back off, I said, looking at Luca. Both of you. Leave her alone. Luca's jaw tightened. I love her. You're 21, I said. You don't know what love is. I know what I feel, he said, with the conviction of someone whose feelings had never been tested by reality. Marco spoke for the first time, his voice flat. She's coming to dinner with my family this weekend. She's already agreed. No, she hasn't, I said, even though I didn't know. Even though Mia might have agreed to anything in the past. 48 hours, because my sister was brilliant and naive and equal, measure and didn't understand that some agreements are signed in blood. She has, Marco said. She's special. My father agrees. The way he said special made my skin crawl. Dante set his glass down with a soft click that somehow carried more weight than a shout. This ends badly for everyone, he said, looking at me. Unless we're smart about it. I'm prepared to offer you a solution. I don't want your solution, I said. You haven't heard it yet, he said. Everyone has a price, Miss Santos. Name yours. I'll pay your sister to choose correctly. To choose no one. To focus on her studies. To stay out of my world and the Russo's world. Or I'll pay you to convince her. Either way, this problem disappears and everyone walks away alive. The words landed like stones. I stared at him, this man who thought money was the answer to everything, who thought people were just transactions waiting to happen, who probably hadn't heard the word no since he'd learned to talk. My hand went to my pocket. By some miracle, there was a crumpled dollar bill in there from the vending machine at work, the change I'd been too tired to collect properly. I pulled it out, crossed the space between us in 3 steps, and slapped it into his palm. Here's yours, I said, my voice shaking with fury and exhaustion and 3 years of holding everything together with spite and stubbornness. Now leave my sister alone. She's not for sale and neither am I. We're not your problem to solve. She's not a transaction. And I don't care how dangerous you are, or how much money you have, or how many people you've killed. Get out of our lives. The room went silent. Even the city outside seemed to hold its breath. Dante looked down at the dollar in his hand. Then he looked at me. Something moved through his eyes that I couldn't name. Surprise, maybe, or the beginning of something that didn't have a word yet. Interesting, he said softly. Very interesting. We're done here, I said, and turned toward the elevator. Miss Santos, he called, and I stopped because my body betrayed me by listening. You should know that Marco's family doesn't accept rejection well. If your sister refuses him, there will be consequences. For her. For you. I can protect you from that, but only if you're reasonable. I looked back over my shoulder. I'd rather face consequences than live in your pocket, I said. And if any of you come near my sister again, I'll make you regret it. With what? Marco asked, almost amused. You're a nurse. I know exactly how to hurt people, I said quietly. And exactly how to make sure they don't get better. The elevator arrived. I stepped inside, and the last thing I saw before the doors closed was Dante Vitale staring at the dollar in his hand, like it was the first thing in years that had surprised him. I made it home, locked the door, and stood in the shower until the water ran cold. When I finally emerged, Mia was asleep in her room, safe for now, and I sat at the kitchen table with my phone and tried to figure out how to protect someone who didn't want to be protected. It took 3 days for me to realize he'd kept the dollar. It took 4 days for the first gift to arrive. I came home from a shift to find a box outside our door. No note, no return address, just expensive packaging and a necklace inside that cost more than I made in a month. I put it back in the box and dropped it in the building's trash chute. The next day, there were flowers. I gave them to Mrs. Chen next door. The day after that, I came home to find our building's broken elevator had been fixed. The super said an anonymous donor had paid for the repairs. This is a problem. I told Mia that night over takeout we couldn't afford, but I'd bought anyway because some days you have to pretend things are normal. What is? She asked, scrolling through her phone. Dante Vitale is trying to... I didn't know how to finish that sentence. Buy me? Impress me? Make me disappear under the weight of unwanted favors? She looked up, eyes bright. He's trying to help. He's trying to manipulate, I corrected. Has Luca backed off? Her silence was its own answer. Mia. He wants to meet for coffee, she said. Just coffee. That's not dangerous. Everything about him is dangerous, I said, and I heard the exhaustion bleeding through my voice. The 3 years of weight I'd been carrying finally starting to crack my edges. She reached across the table and took my hand. Elle, I know you're scared, but you can't protect me from everything. I'm not a kid anymore. You'll always be a kid to me, I said, and it was the truest thing I'd spoken in days. That night, I lay in bed and listened to the buildings settle around me. Pipes, voices, footsteps, the sound of the city breathing. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Unknown number. Again. I considered not answering. Then I considered that not answering would just delay whatever this was, and delay had never been a luxury I could afford. What? I said instead of hello. The gifts offended you. Dante Vitale's voice came through the line like smoke. Noted. The gifts were bribes, I said. They were apologies, he said. For making you feel like you're something that can be bought. You're not. I learned that when you threw $1 at me like I was a parking meter. Despite myself, my mouth twitched. Don't call me again. I need to, he said. And there was something different in his tone. Something that sounded almost like honesty. Marco's family is planning something. My sources say they're going to make a move on your sister this week, probably Friday when she has her late class. My blood turned to ice. You're lying. I don't lie about danger, he said. I benefit from it sometimes. I cause it often, but I don't lie about it. Your sister is in real trouble, Miss Santos. Let me help. Why do you care? I asked. Why would you help us? The pause stretched. Then, because you handed me $1 and looked me in the eye and told me to leave. Do you understand how many people would kill for the privilege of being in the same room as me? How many women would have taken everything I offered and asked for more? You threw it back in my face. You're either the stupidest person I've ever met or the most interesting. I'm trying to figure out which. I'm exhausted, I said, and I'm done with this conversation. Friday, he said. 7 p.m. If she's not home by 7:30, call me. I don't have your number, I said. Yes, you do, he said. You've had it since the moment I called. Check your contacts. I pulled the phone away from my ear and checked. There it was, Dante Vitale, with a number I hadn't entered. How did you... I'm very good at what I do, he said. And what I do is make sure the people I value stay alive. You're valuable, Miss Santos, whether you want to be or not. He hung up before I could tell him where to put his value assessment. Friday came with the weight of prophecy. I tried to get Mia to skip her late class. She refused. I tried to follow her to campus. She caught me at the subway and told me I needed therapy, not a surveillance hobby. By 7:15, she wasn't answering texts. By 7:25, her phone was going straight to voicemail. At 7:29, I stared at Dante Vitale's contact information and felt pride and fear go to war in my chest. Fear won, I called. He answered on the first ring. Where is she? No hello, no preamble, just tactical immediacy that made me understand how he ran an empire. Columbia campus, Professor Hart's building, sociology seminar, room 404. My voice shook. Stay there, he said. Lock your door. I'll bring her home. I'm coming with you, I said. Miss Santos. She's my sister, I said. I'm coming with you or I'm going alone. Choose. Another pause. Then something that might have been respect bleeding into his tone. 15 minutes. Be outside your building. He made it in 10. The car that pulled up was different from the town car. Black SUV, tinted windows. And when the door opened, Dante Vitale was inside looking like violence in a three-piece. Suit. Get in, he said. I got in. Because my sister was somewhere in the dark and I'd walk into hell barefoot if it meant bringing her back. SUV moved through the city like a bullet with purpose. Dante sat across from me. Phone pressed to his ear, issuing commands in a voice that made grown men restructure their entire evening around his syntax. 2 other men occupied the front seats. One driving with the kind of precision that suggested military training. The other watching mirrors and side streets with eyes that cataloged threats the way some people catalog birds. 3 vehicles, Dante said into the phone. Russo colors, parked on Amsterdam between 116th and 117th. I want eyes on all exits. If she's still in the building, we extract quietly. If they've moved her, I want to know where before they make it 10 blocks. He paused, listening. I don't care what you have to do. Find her. He ended the call and looked at me. In the passing streetlights, his face was all sharp angles and controlled fury. When we get there, you stay in the car. No, I said. Miss Santos, Elena, I said. If you're going to risk your life for my sister, you can use my first name. Something flickered across his expression. Elena, he repeated, and the way he said it made my name sound like something that had weight. These men are dangerous. They won't hesitate to hurt you if it gives them leverage. Then don't give them the chance, I said. I'm not staying in the car while my sister is in there. He studied me for a long moment. Then he reached beneath his seat and pulled out a vest. Kevlar, compact, the kind that said he kept these on hand for exactly this type of emergency. Put this on. I took it without argument and fastened it over my scrubs. It was heavy and smelled like gun oil and something else I couldn't name. Safety, maybe, or the illusion of it. If I tell you to run, he said, you run. If I tell you to get down, you get down. If I tell you to do anything, you do it without question. Understood? Understood, I said, because now wasn't the time for pride. The driver spoke without taking his eyes off the road. 2 minutes out, Dante's phone buzzed. He answered, listened, and his jaw tightened. She's still inside. 4th floor. They have 3 men with her. He looked at me. She's alive. Scared, but alive. The relief hit me so hard I had to close my eyes for a second. When I opened them, Dante was still watching me with an expression I couldn't read. We'll get her out, he said, and it wasn't a promise. It was a fact he was willing to make true with violence if necessary. We pulled up 2 blocks from the building. Dante's men materialized from other vehicles like shadows gaining substance. 6 of them, all dressed in dark clothes, all moving with the coordinated efficiency of people who'd done this before. Dante gave instructions in a low voice, and they dispersed to cover exits and establish perimeter. Stay close to me, Dante said, and then we were moving. The building was one of those old academic structures that looked like it had been built when people still believed in the permanence of institutions. Stone facade, heavy doors, the kind of hallways that echoed. Dante moved through it like he'd memorized the blueprints, and maybe he had. His hand rested near his jacket, where I knew a gun lived, and I tried not to think about how normal that felt in this moment. We took the stairs because elevators were traps. By the 3rd floor, my legs were burning and my heart was a war drum against my ribs. Dante glanced back once to make sure I was keeping up, and I met his eyes with a look that said I'd crawl up these stairs on broken glass if that's what it took. The 4th floor hallway was empty except for institutional lighting and the smell of old coffee. Dante held up a hand and we stopped. He tilted his head listening. Then I heard it too. Voices, male, coming from room 404. The same room where Mia's seminar met. Dante pulled out his phone and sent a text. Seconds later, his men emerged from the stairwell at the far end of the hall. Synchronized. Tactical. They took positions on either side of the door. When we go in, Dante said quietly to me, you stay behind me. Get to your sister and get her out. Don't stop for anything. I nodded because my throat had forgotten how to make words. He tested the door handle. Locked. One of his men produced a small tool, worked it for 3 seconds, and the lock gave with a soft click that sounded like permission. Then everything happened in the space between heartbeats. The door swung open. Dante moved through it with his gun drawn, and his voice cutting through the room like a blade. Nobody moves. 3 men stood around Mia, who was sitting in a chair looking small and terrified and furious all at once. The men reached for weapons. Dante's people were faster. The sound of safeties clicking off filled the room like a language everyone understood. Hands, Dante said, and his voice had gone to that place where temperature drops before a storm. Now. The men complied because the alternative was a very short conversation with mortality. I pushed past Dante and went straight to Mia. Her hands were bound behind the chair with zip ties, and there was a bruise forming on her cheek that made something in me go cold and sharp. I've got you, I said, working at the ties with shaking fingers. One of Dante's men handed me a knife without being asked. I cut through the plastic and Mia fell forward into my arms, sobbing. They said they were taking me to Marco, she choked out. They said his father wanted to meet me. Then they grabbed me and... Elle, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. You're okay, I said into her hair, holding her like I could fuse us back into one person who couldn't be torn apart. You're okay now. Gentlemen, Dante said to the 3 men, and his tone was conversational in the way that preceded something terrible. "Tell Marco that if he comes near either of these women again, I will personally ensure he understands the mistake. And tell his father that this is the only warning he gets. The next time I won't be polite." One of the men, older, with a scar that bisected his eyebrow, spat on the floor. "The Russos don't take orders from Vitales." "You do now," Dante said, and the finality in his voice made the man's face go pale. We left the building with Mia between us, Dante's men forming a protective circle that moved like a single organism. No one followed. No one was stupid enough to try. In the SUV, Mia curled against me and cried until she had no tears left. Dante made phone calls, to lawyers, to doctors, to people whose jobs apparently included making problems disappear. He never once told Mia to stop crying, or to be strong, or any of the useless things people say when they don't understand that sometimes you need to break before you can be whole again. When we pulled up to my building, I started to get out. Dante's hand on my arm stopped me. "You can't stay here," he said. "This is our home," I said. "This is where Marco knows to find you," he said. "What happened tonight?" That was a message. The next time will be a conclusion. You need protection, real protection. "We'll be fine," I said, but the words sounded hollow even to me. Dante's eyes held mine. "I have an estate outside the city. Separate wing for guests. 24-hour security, staff who know how to be invisible when needed. You and Mia can stay there until I've neutralized the threat." "We're not your responsibility," I said. "You became my responsibility the moment my brother got involved with your sister," he said. "And you became something else entirely the moment you handed me that $1 and looked at me like I was just a man who needed to learn better manners." Mia lifted her head from my shoulder. "Elle, please. I can't stay here. Every shadow is going to be them. Every sound. I can't." I looked at my sister's face. Bruised, terrified, young in a way that made my chest ache, and knew I'd already lost this argument. "Fine," I said to Dante. "But we pack our own things, and this is temporary." "Of course," he said, in the tone of someone who knew temporary had a way of becoming permanent, if you were patient enough. We packed in 20 minutes. Clothes, toiletries, Mia's textbooks, the photo albums I'd kept from our parents' house because some things you carry even when they're heavy. Dante's men loaded our bags into the SUV like they moved people in the middle of the night regularly. Maybe they did. The drive to the estate took 40 minutes, moving away from the city's dense chaos into the kind of landscape where trees had space to be themselves, and houses sat behind gates that said money without having to shout. The Vitale estate rose out of the dark like something from another century. Stone and iron, and the kind of architecture that suggested permanence was a given, not a hope. The gates opened without anyone pressing anything. Security cameras tracked our progress up the long driveway. The house itself was sprawling without being ostentatious, beautiful in the way that things are when they don't have to prove anything. Inside, the air smelled like wood polish and old money and something green from the flower arrangements that populated every surface. A woman in her 50s with kind eyes and capable hands introduced herself as Teresa, the house manager. She showed us to the west wing, our wing, she said, with rooms that had their own bathrooms and views of gardens that probably looked spectacular in daylight. "Anything you need," Teresa said. "You pick up the phone and press 9. Someone will answer. Always." Mia chose the room closest to mine because 3 hours ago she'd been tied to a chair and distance wasn't something she could tolerate yet. I helped her into bed, smoothed her hair like I used to when she was small, and nightmares were simpler things. "He saved me," she whispered. "Dante, he's not what I thought." "What did you think?" I asked. "A monster," she said. "Luca talks about him like he's this cold, ruthless thing. But tonight he looked at me like I mattered, like I was someone's sister, and that made me worth saving." "You are worth saving," I said. "You've always been worth saving." "I know," she said. "But it's different when someone who doesn't have to care still does." I kissed her forehead and left her to sleep, though I knew sleep would be a difficult negotiation tonight. In my own room, I stood at the window and looked out at the dark shapes of gardens and the distant glow of the city on the horizon. My phone buzzed with messages from the hospital. My supervisor asking if I was okay. Could I cover tomorrow's shift? They were short-staffed again. I texted back that I'd had a family emergency and needed a few days. She responded immediately, "Take what you need. Family first." I showered in a bathroom with heated floors and water pressure that felt like a luxury I'd forgotten existed. When I emerged, someone had left a tray outside my door. Tea, toast, fruit, and a note in elegant handwriting. "Teresa said you might be hungry. You're safe here." Di took the tray inside and sat on the bed that was somehow exactly the right firmness and tried to figure out how my life had become something I didn't recognize in the span of a week. Sleep came in fits and starts. I woke at 3 a.m. from a dream where Mia was drowning and I couldn't reach her no matter how fast I swam. My heart was racing and my skin felt too tight. I got up, pulled on the robe someone had thoughtfully left in the closet, and went looking for water. The house at night was a different creature than the house by day. Moonlight through tall windows made geometry out of shadows. I found my way to the kitchen by instinct and luck. A massive room with professional-grade everything and a refrigerator that could have housed a family of 4. I was pouring water from a pitcher when a voice behind me said, "Can't sleep either?" I didn't jump because nurses learn not to startle easily, but it was a near thing. Dante stood in the doorway in dark pajama pants and a t-shirt that made him look younger, and somehow more dangerous without the armor of his suits. His hair was mussed like he'd been running hands through it. "Bad dreams," I said. "Those are going around," he said. He moved into the kitchen and opened a cabinet like he knew where everything lived, pulling down a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. "Drink?" "I shouldn't," I said. "Neither should I," he said. "But I'm going to anyway. Join me or don't." He poured 2 fingers into each glass and slid one across the counter to me. I picked it up because the night felt too big to face without some kind of fortification. We stood in silence for a moment, drinking. The whiskey burned in a way that felt like honesty. "Thank you," I said finally. "For tonight? For Mia?" "You don't need to thank me," he said. "I do," I said. "You didn't have to come. You could have sent your men, but you came yourself." He looked at me over the rim of his glass. "Did you really think I'd send someone else?" "I don't know what I thought," I said. "I don't know you." "No," he agreed. "You don't, but you're learning. So teach me," I said. "Tell me who Dante Vitale is when he's not being the most dangerous man in the city." He laughed, short and sharp. "That's the problem. I'm always that man. I don't get to take it off." "Everyone gets to take off their armor sometimes," I said. "Not when people's lives depend on you keeping it on," he said. And there was something raw beneath the words. "My brother, for instance. Do you know how old I was when our father died?" "No," I said. 19, he said. "Luca was 7. He doesn't remember what it was like before I took over. He thinks this life is normal. The money, the power, the way people move when we enter a room. He doesn't remember that we used to be something else, something smaller. He doesn't remember our father bleeding out on a warehouse floor while I held him and promised I'd take care of everything, that I'd keep us safe, keep the family together." He poured more whiskey, his hand steady even though his voice wasn't. "I raised him. I sent him to good schools. I kept him out of the business as much as I could. And then he meets your sister and falls in love like it's that simple. Like love doesn't get people killed in my world. Like I can just let him have this one normal thing without it becoming a weapon someone uses to destroy us. Love isn't a weakness," I said quietly. "It is when it gives your enemies leverage," he said. "Marco's family saw Luca's interest in Mia and decided she was valuable. If Luca hadn't met her, she'd be safe. If he wasn't a Vitale, she'd be safe. But he is, and she's not. And now I have to figure out how to protect both of them without starting a war that will kill hundreds of people who didn't ask to be part of this." "You can't control everything," I said. "Watch me try," he said, and there was something bleak in his smile. I set down my glass and looked at him, really looked at him. "You're exhausted," I said. "When's the last time you slept a full night?" "Define full," he said. "More than 4 hours," I said. He thought about it. 2 months ago, maybe 3. "That's not sustainable," I said, falling into nurse mode because some habits are too useful to break. "Your body needs rest. Your brain needs rest. You can't protect anyone if you're running on empty. I don't have a choice, he said. There's always a choice, I said. You could walk away. Let someone else lead. Live your own life. He looked at me like I'd suggested he sprout wings. Could you walk away from Mia? The question landed like a stone in still water. No, I admitted. Then you understand, he said. We're the same, you and I. We're the ones who carry it, who hold the weight so other people don't have to. It's lonely, I said, because it was. Yes, he said. It is. We stood there in the quiet kitchen with the moon painting everything silver, and I understood something I hadn't before. Dante Vitale was powerful and dangerous and ruthless, but he was also tired and trapped and human beneath all the armor he wore. The dollar, he said after a while. Why did you do that? I smiled despite myself. You really want to know? I've been thinking about it for a week, he said. You looked at me like I was a problem with a simple solution. Like I was just a man who needed to be reminded that not everything is for sale. Because you're not, I said. A god, I mean. You're just a man who's very good at making other people believe you are. But I've spent 3 years holding people together while they bled, Dante. I've seen men who thought they were invincible discover they were just breakable in expensive suits. The dollar was me reminding both of us that you're human, that your power ends where my sister's life begins. He stared at me like I'd done something indecent. Every woman I've ever known has wanted something from me. Money, status, protection, access. You threw a dollar at me like I was worth exactly that and nothing more. Maybe that's what you needed, I said. Maybe it was, he said quietly. He set down his glass and moved closer, not touching, just standing near enough that I could feel the heat coming off him. You're the first real thing I've encountered in years. Do you know that? The first person who looked at me and saw a man instead of an empire. Don't romanticize me, I said, even though my heart was doing complicated things in my chest. I'm not some pure innocent thing. I'm just tired and stubborn and trying to keep my family safe. I know, he said. That's what makes you real. The air between us changed into something that had texture. I should have stepped back. Instead, I stayed exactly where I was, looking up at him and wondering what it would be like to touch someone who carried the same weight I did. I should go to bed, I said. You should, he agreed. Neither of us moved. Then footsteps on the stairs made us both turn. Luca appeared in the doorway, stopped short when he saw us. Oh, sorry. I didn't know anyone else was up. We were just talking, I said. And it was true, even if it felt like a lie by omission. Luca looked between us with eyes that were too knowing for 21. Right, talking. He grabbed a water bottle from the fridge. Mia, okay? Sleeping, I said. Or trying to. I should talk to her, he said. Tomorrow, apologize, this is my fault. It's Marco's fault, Dante said, his voice hard. Don't take responsibility for someone else's violence. But if I hadn't, Luca started. If you hadn't what? Dante cut him off. Felt something for someone? That's not a crime, Luca. It's not even a mistake. Marco's obsession is his own problem. You didn't create it. Luca looked at his brother with something complicated in his expression. Gratitude and resentment and love all tangled together. You'd understand if you'd ever let yourself feel anything for anyone. I feel plenty, Dante said quietly. I just don't act on it because people die when I do. Luca left with his water bottle, and the silence he left behind was louder than his presence had been. He doesn't understand, Dante said finally. He thinks I'm cold, unfeeling. He doesn't understand that feeling everything is exactly why I can't afford to show it. Maybe you should tell him, I said. Maybe, he said. Or maybe it's safer if he keeps thinking I'm the monster. Monsters don't have weaknesses people can exploit. Everyone has weaknesses, I said. The question is whether you trust anyone with them. His eyes found mine. I'm beginning to think I might. I left him there in the kitchen with his whiskey and his insomnia and went back to my room. I didn't sleep well, but I did sleep, and that felt like victory. The days fell into a rhythm that surprised me with its normalcy. Mia slept late and stayed close to the house. Luca came by every afternoon. and they sat in the garden where Dante's security could watch them without being intrusive. Teresa made sure we ate meals that didn't come from vending machines. I called the hospital and took a leave of absence that my supervisor granted without question because apparently my work record had earned me grace I didn't know I'd accumulated. And Dante was everywhere and nowhere, appearing at dinner, disappearing into his study for hours, taking calls on the terrace at midnight while I watched from my window and tried not to think about how good he looked in moonlight. The 5th night I was there, I couldn't sleep again. The house had that particular silence that comes at 3 a.m., when the world is holding its breath between darkness and dawn. I went looking for tea and found Dante in his study, door open, the light from inside spilling into the dark hallway like an invitation. He was at his desk, glasses on. I hadn't known he wore glasses, with papers spread out around him like casualties. Security footage played on one monitor, spreadsheets on another. He looked up when I appeared in the doorway. "You're up late," he said. "So are you," I said. "Do you ever sleep?" "When I'm dead," he said. "Come in. I could use the distraction." I came in because my feet made the decision before my brain could negotiate. The study was all dark wood and leather, shelves of books that looked red rather than decorative, a globe in the corner that was probably older than I was. "What are you working on?" I asked. "Legitimate business," he said, leaning back in his chair, "trying to figure out how to move more of the family assets into legal enterprises. It's tedious work, lawyers and accountants and paperwork, that makes me want to set things on fire." "Why bother?" I asked. "If you're already—" I gestured vaguely at him, meaning powerful, meaning established, meaning untouchable. "Because I want to leave Luca something that won't kill him," he said simply. "I want him to have a choice. The business as it is now, there's no walking away from it. But if I can legitimize enough of it, build something clean, maybe he can have a life that doesn't end with a funeral before he's 40. "That's a long game," I said. "I'm a patient man," he said. "When it matters," I sat in the chair across from his desk. "Tell me something," I said. "Why did you really help us? Don't say it's because of Luca. You could have paid us off, made us disappear, done 100 things that didn't require you personally showing up to rescue my sister." He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. Without them, he looked younger, tired. "You really want to know?" "I wouldn't ask if I didn't," I said. He was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. "When you threw that dollar at me, I saw something in your eyes. Fury, yes. Exhaustion, yes. But also this absolute unwillingness to break. You were terrified and overwhelmed and facing down the most dangerous man you'd ever met. And you still looked at me like I was just an obstacle between you and your sister's safety, like nothing I could do would make you stop fighting." He paused. "I haven't met anyone like that in my entire life. Everyone I know has a breaking point. Everyone can be bought or scared or convinced to stand down. But you, I knew then that you'd walk through fire barefoot if it meant keeping Mia safe. And I thought—" He stopped. "Thought what?" I prompted. "That maybe someone like that was worth knowing." He finished quietly. "That maybe someone who couldn't be bought or broken was exactly the kind of person I'd been looking for without knowing I was looking." The words sat between us like something fragile. I didn't know what to do with them, so I said the truth. I fell a little bit too. That night. Not when you arrived, you were terrifying. But later, when you brought Mia home and you didn't tell her to stop crying. When you looked at her like she mattered even though you'd never met her before. That's when I saw it. "Saw what?" he asked. "That you're not the monster you pretend to be," I said. "That you care so much it's killing you, and you can't let anyone see it because caring is dangerous in your world." His throat worked. "Elena," the sound of glass shattering made us both freeze. Then an alarm started screaming through the house like the end of the world. Dante was on his feet instantly, gun in hand, moving toward the door. "Stay here," he commanded. "Like hell," I said, and followed him because my sister was in this house, and nothing would keep me from getting to her. We ran through hallways that had become battlegrounds, security rushing past us. Shouts in Italian, the sound of more breaking glass. Dante's phone was at his ear issuing orders while he moved with the kind of lethal grace that made you understand why people feared him. We reached the west wing. Mia's door was open. My heart stopped, but she was there, standing in her doorway with Luca's arms around her, and they were both fine. Scared, but fine. What happened? I demanded. Someone tried to breach the perimeter, one of Dante's security team said, appearing behind us. Eastgate, 2 vehicles. They got as far as the garden before we stopped them. Russo? Dante asked, his voice like ice. Yes, sir. Marco was in one of the vehicles. He's demanding to speak with you. Something moved through Dante's face that made me take a step back. Where is he now? Garden, contained, waiting? Dante turned to me. Get your sister somewhere safe. The panic room, 3rd floor. Teresa will show you. I'm coming with you, I said. Elena, this is my life. I cut him off. My sister they tried to take. I'm coming with you. He looked at me, and I saw the calculation in his eyes, the weighing of risks and assets and what it would cost to argue. Fine, he said, but you stay behind me, and if this goes wrong, you run. Promise me. I promise. I lied. We went to the garden together. Marco Russo stood surrounded by 6 armed men who all had guns pointed at him. He looked disheveled and furious and slightly unhinged. His suit rumpled, his hair wild, blood on his collar from what looked like a split lip. Dante, he said when we appeared, we need to talk. You tried to breach my home, Dante said, conversational. That's not talking. That's an act of war. I want Mia, Marco said. My father wants her. We're willing to pay. Name your price. She's not for sale, Dante said. Everything's for sale, Marco said. You taught me that. I was wrong, Dante said, and I felt the words like a physical thing. Some things are priceless. Your father should have taught you that. Marco's eyes found me, and what I saw there made my skin crawl. The sister. The nurse. I can see why Luca's girl has a protector. But you're protecting the wrong one, Dante. I'm the one with the power here. I'm the one whose family can make this easy or very, very hard. Leave, Dante said. Now. Before I forget that killing you would start a war I'm trying to avoid. I'll leave, Marco said. But I'm taking her with me. He moved fast. Faster than anyone expected. His hand went inside his jacket and I saw the gun. And time went strange the way it does when your brain understands death is very close. Dante moved between us without thinking, his body a shield, and the sound of the gunshot was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. But Dante didn't fall. One of his men had been faster. The bullet went wide into the garden's stone wall, and then Marco was on the ground with 3 guns pointed at his head. I should kill you for that, Dante said, and his voice was something I'd never heard before. I should put a bullet in your head and end this now. But you won't, Marco said, blood running from his mouth where someone had hit him. Because you're trying to be legitimate. Because you're trying to be better. It makes you weak, Dante. No, Dante said quietly. It makes me patient. Get him out of here! Call his father. Tell him if Marco comes near any of these women again, I will consider it an act of war and respond accordingly. They dragged Marco away. The security team dispersed to patrol and repair, and Dante turned to me with eyes that were too bright. Are you hurt? He asked. No, I said. You moved so fast, I wasn't going to let him hurt you, he said. I couldn't. He stopped, like the sentence had too many endings, and he didn't know which one to choose. We stood there in the garden with the dawn starting to break on the horizon, turning the sky the color of a bruise healing. Something had shifted between us in the past few minutes, some understanding that went deeper than words. Come with me, I said, taking his hand because my body made decisions before my mind could intervene. Where? He asked. Somewhere quiet, I said. Somewhere we can both breathe for 5 minutes without someone trying to kill someone. He let me lead him inside, through halls that were starting to show signs of staff cleaning up the chaos, to the library. A massive room with floor-to-ceiling books and leather furniture, and windows that looked out on the garden where we'd just faced down death. I poured wine with shaking hands. He took the glass and drank like it was medicine. We sat on the leather sofa, not quite touching, and let the adrenaline bleed out of us slowly. I thought he was going to shoot you, I said finally. He would have missed, Dante said. You don't know that, I said. You can't know that. You moved without thinking. I moved exactly because I was thinking, he said, turning to look at me. I was thinking that if anything happened to you, I would burn this entire city to the ground. I was thinking that somewhere in the past week, you became something I couldn't afford to lose. I was thinking... I kissed him before he could finish the sentence because the words were too big, and I needed to make them physical, make them real. His mouth was warm and tasted like whiskey and something darker, and for a moment he froze in surprise. Then his hands came up to cup my face like I was something breakable, and he kissed me back with a careful intensity that made my whole body go liquid. It was desperate and clumsy, and perfect in the way that first kisses are when they're between two people who've been holding back too long. His thumb stroked my cheek. My fingers tangled in his hair. The world outside the library disappeared, and for 30 seconds, there was just us, and this thing between us that had teeth. Then his hand moved to my waist, and something in me locked up. The touch was gentle, but suddenly I wasn't in the library anymore. I was 14 and watching my father grab my mother the same way. Watching her flinch, watching him tighten his grip like ownership instead of affection. My breathing went shallow. My body went rigid. Dante pulled back immediately, his hands lifting away from me like I'd burned him. "Elena, what's wrong?" I couldn't speak. Couldn't get air. The panic was a fist around my throat. "Look at me," he said gently, his voice cutting through the static in my head. "Elena, look at me." I forced my eyes to his face. He was watching me with concern and confusion and no trace of anger. "I'm sorry," I managed. I thought I could... "Hey," he said softly. "You don't have to explain. We don't have to do anything. Just breathe, okay? Breathe with me." He took a long, slow breath, and I tried to match it. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Again. Again. Slowly, the panic started to recede like a tide going out. "I'm sorry," I said again when I could speak. "I wanted to. I do want to. But when you touched me, my father, before he died, he wasn't always kind to my mother. He would grab her, hurt her, and sometimes when someone touches me certain ways, I just..." Understanding moved across his face, followed by something that looked like pain. "Elena, I would never..." "I know," I said. "Logically, I know, but my body doesn't always listen to logic." He was quiet for a moment, his jaw working like he was trying to find the right words. "Thank you for telling me," he said finally. "And I need you to hear this. We don't move forward until you're ready. A month, a year, forever, I don't care. I can wait as long as you need. You're not something I'm trying to acquire or win. You're someone I'm trying to deserve." The words cracked something open in my chest. Tears came without permission, and I hated them for making me vulnerable when I needed to be strong. "Come here," he said, and he opened his arms in invitation, not demand. I moved into them because I needed to be held by someone who understood that holding wasn't the same as keeping. He wrapped his arms around me carefully, like I was glass that had already been broken once. I cried into his shirt while he stroked my hair and said nothing because there was nothing that needed to be said. "I want to be ready," I whispered eventually. "I want to be able to do this without falling apart." "You will be," he said against my hair. "When you are, I'll be here. And until then, I'm still here. This doesn't change anything." We stayed like that until dawn turned the library golden, until my tears dried and my breathing steadied and I felt like myself again. He held me the whole time like it was the easiest thing in the world. When I finally pulled back, his shirt was damp and his eyes were soft. "Better?" he asked. "Better," I agreed. "Good," he said. "Now go get some sleep. Real sleep. Doctor's orders." "You're not a doctor," I said. "No," he agreed, "but I am very good at giving orders." I left him in the library and went back to my room as the house woke around me. In my bed, with the morning light painting patterns on the ceiling, I thought about trust and trauma and how sometimes healing looks like admitting you're broken. And I thought about how Vitale had held me while I fell apart and never once tried to put me back together, the way he wanted me to be. That, I realized, was what love looked like when it was real. The days after Marco's attempt on the estate moved with the strange slowness of aftermath. Security doubled. Patrols tripled. The house became a fortress within a fortress, and I watched Dante transform from the man who'd held me in the library to something harder, colder, more dangerous. He disappeared into meetings that lasted hours, phone calls that stretched past midnight, and I understood that whatever was coming next would be brutal. Mia stayed close to Luca, and I stopped trying to separate them. Some battles you can't win, and some you realize you were fighting for the wrong reasons. He loved her. She loved him. And in a world where people like Marco existed, maybe having someone who would die for you wasn't the worst thing. I found myself in Dante's study one afternoon while he was gone, drawn by the same curiosity that had gotten me into trouble as a child. The files on his desk were marked with names I recognized from news reports. Russo family members, business associates, the complex web of alliances that held the criminal underworld together like a spider's silk. One file caught my attention, Marco Russo medical records. I opened it because nurses are incurably nosy about medical histories, and what I found made my blood run cold in a completely different way than expected. Hospital admission 3 months ago. Psychiatric evaluation. Notes about pressure from family. Threats against his life if he didn't secure the Santos girl. References to his father's increasingly erratic behavior and demands. A prescription for anxiety medication that had been filled and refilled with alarming frequency. Marco wasn't just obsessed. He was being coerced. I took photos of the relevant pages with my phone and went looking for Dante. I found him in the garden with 2 of his men, discussing security rotations. When he saw my face, he dismissed them immediately. "What's wrong?" he asked. "I need to show you something," I said, and pulled up the photos. "Marco, he's not acting alone. His father is blackmailing him into pursuing Mia. Look at these notes. Threats, psychiatric evaluation. The timeline matches exactly when he first approached her." Dante's jaw tightened as he scrolled through the images. "Where did you get these?" "Your desk," I said. "I'm sorry, I was curious," he finished. "I know. It's one of the things He stopped, refocused. "This changes things." "How?" I asked. "Because Marco's father is old guard," Dante said. "He's been trying to start a war for years to consolidate power. If he's using his own son as a pawn, then this isn't about Mia at all. It's about creating a conflict that forces other families to choose sides. So what do? I asked. He looked at me, and something in his expression made my stomach flip. "We end it. Tonight. I'm meeting with the heads of the 5 families. Neutral ground. I'm going to expose what Marco's father has been doing and offer Marco a way out." "That's dangerous," I said. "Everything I do is dangerous," he said. "But this time I have something I didn't have before." "What's that?" I asked. "Proof," he said, holding up my phone. "And you." I went with him because by this point arguing felt performative. We drove into the city as the sun set, painting everything the color of warning. The meeting was in a restaurant that had been closed for a private event. Neutral ground, Dante explained, where bloodshed was forbidden by old agreements that predated any of us. Inside, 5 men sat around a table that could have hosted a small army. I recognized Marco's father immediately. Older, cruel-faced, with eyes that looked at people like they were objects he was considering breaking. Marco sat beside him, looking haunted. Dante presented the evidence with the clinical precision of a prosecutor. Medical records, psychiatric evaluations, phone transcripts his people had obtained through means I probably didn't want to know about. The blackmail, the coercion, the way Marco's father had used his own son to try to engineer a war. "This isn't about territory or business," Dante said, his voice carrying through the room. "This is about one man's ambition destroying all our families. Marco isn't the problem. His father is." Marco's father stood, rage turning his face purple. "You dare—" "I dare," Dante said quietly. "Because I have every family in this room on recorded lines agreeing that if you're the one pushing for war, you're the one who loses everything. Look around. Count the allies you have left." The silence was deafening. Marco's father looked at the other men, and I watched the understanding dawn that he'd been outmaneuvered. "Marco," Dante said, turning to the younger man, "I'm offering you a choice. Witness protection, federal custody, a new life away from all of this. Or you can stay and watch your father burn everything, including you." Marco's hands shook on the table. "You'd really let me walk away?" "You're not my enemy," Dante said. "You're a weapon someone else tried to use. I don't punish weapons. I disarm them." What happened next moved quickly. Federal agents who'd been waiting outside. Marco choosing freedom over loyalty to a father who'd never earned it. The dissolution of power happening in real time, as Marco's father was escorted away in handcuffs on charges that Dante had apparently been building for months. On the drive home, I stared at Dante's profile in the passing streetlights. "You planned all of this," I said. "I've been planning it since Marco first approached Mia," he said. "I just needed the right moment." "And I gave you the evidence," I said. "You gave me the missing piece," he corrected. "The thing that made it irrefutable." Back at the estate, the house felt different, lighter, like a weight had been lifted from foundations that had been bearing it too long. Mia and Luca were in the garden, and when we told them it was over, truly over, Mia cried with relief. Dante found me later on the terrace, watching the stars pretend the city's light pollution didn't exist. He handed me a glass of wine and stood beside me in comfortable silence. "Thank you," he said finally. "For what?" I asked. "For being exactly who you are," he said. "For not pretending to be softer or harder than you are. For throwing that dollar at me and making me remember that some things matter more than power." I turned to look at him. "I've been thinking," I said. "Dangerous pastime," he said, but there was warmth in it. "About the library," I said. "About what happened. What didn't happen." His expression grew serious. "Elena, I meant what I said. We don't have to." "I know," I said, "but I want to. Not because I'm ready to stop being afraid, but because I'm ready to try being brave." Something moved through his eyes like light on water. "When?" he asked quietly. "Now," I said. "If you want, but somewhere beautiful, somewhere that feels like a beginning instead of all the heavy things we've been carrying." He thought for a moment. "I know a place," he said, and took my hand. He led me through the garden to a greenhouse I hadn't noticed before. Glass walls that caught moonlight and turned it into something ethereal, night-blooming jasmine filling the air with sweetness, orchids in impossible colors climbing toward a ceiling that was all stars. "I come here when I need to remember there are still beautiful things," he said. "Things that grow instead of just taking space." The greenhouse was warm and alive and felt like the opposite of every violent thing that had touched our lives. I turned to face him, took both his hands, and let myself be completely honest. "I want this," I said. "Here where it's beautiful and alive, where I can trust you with every part of me." "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice careful. "We have forever if you need it." I answered by pulling him closer, by pressing my mouth to his, and feeling him respond with a gentleness that made my whole body understand this was different. This was choice. This was mine. The kiss deepened, and this time when he touched my waist, I didn't freeze. I leaned into it, let myself feel the warmth of his hands, the steady strength of him. "Slow," I whispered against his mouth. "As slow as you need," he promised. I took my time, unbuttoning his shirt with fingers that trembled but didn't stop. He let me set the pace, his hands steady on my hips, his eyes on my face watching for any sign I needed to stop. When I pushed the shirt from his shoulders, his skin was warm under my palms. "You're beautiful," I said, and meant it. Not just his body, but the way he was letting me lead, the trust in his stillness. He helped me out of my dress with careful hands, asking permission with his eyes before each movement. When I stood in just moonlight and vulnerability, his breath caught. "You're breathtaking," he said, voice rough with restraint. He laid his jacket on the mosaic floor, arranged orchid petals for softness, and lowered me down like I was something precious. The cool tiles beneath the fabric, the warm air around us, the scent of jasmine mixing with his skin, all of it combined into something that felt safe and wanted, and entirely ours. "If you need to stop," he said, close now but still asking, "tell me. Nothing matters more than you feeling safe." "I feel safe," I said, and pulled him closer. It's never felt so right. We moved together with patience, his hands learning the map of me, while mine traced the scars on his back, the tension in his shoulders, all the places he carried weight. Each touch was a question I answered with trust. Each kiss deepened the connection between us. You keep me safe, I whispered, as we became as close as two people can be, wrapped in each other and the choice we'd made. It's a promise, he said, always. What we shared was ancient and new, gentle and profound, his voice in my ear telling me I was perfect, telling me this moment mattered more than anything. My hands in his hair, his mouth on my throat, the world narrowing to just emotion and safety, and the strange alchemy of two broken things making something whole. When overwhelming feelings washed over me, it felt like release in more ways than one. Letting go of fear, of control, of the walls I'd built to keep myself protected. He experienced the same moments later, my name on his lips like a prayer, and we stayed held together while the world reassembled itself around us. After, we lay on his jacket with flower petals in my hair, and his hand tracing lazy patterns on my shoulder. The greenhouse held us in its glass heart while the moon watched through the ceiling. Thank you, I said quietly. For what? He asked. For seeing me, I said. For making this ours. For being patient when I needed patience, and present when I needed presence. He kissed my forehead, and I felt the smile against my skin. Thank you for giving me your trust, for choosing me. We stayed there until dawn threatened, then dressed slowly and returned to the house as it began to wake. In my bed, wrapped in sheets that smelled clean and safe, I slept better than I had in years. The weeks that followed felt like learning to live in a new language. Dante began the slow work of legitimizing more of the family business. Meetings with lawyers and accountants, investments in legal enterprises, building something Luca could inherit without it killing him. Mia went back to her classes with security that was invisible but present. Luca started studying for the LSAT, because some dreams are worth pursuing even when they seem impossible. And Dante and I learned each other in all the ways that matter. The way he took his coffee, the scar on his shoulder from a knife fight when he was 17, how he'd read to Luca every night after their father died until the boy could sleep without nightmares, the way he looked at me like I was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. I learned that he was afraid of very few things, but losing the people he loved made the list. That he'd been alone for so long, he'd forgotten what it felt like to come home to someone who cared if he made it through the day. That beneath all the power and danger was just a man who'd been 19 and terrified, and had built an empire out of desperation and duty. 2 months after the greenhouse, I woke up nauseous. I ignored it for 3 days before the pattern became undeniable. I took the test in a gas station bathroom because I couldn't wait until I got home, and when the second line appeared, I sat on the toilet lid and tried to figure out how I felt. Terrified, elated, completely unprepared. All of it at once. I told him in the greenhouse because it felt right, returning to the place where we'd begun. He was checking the jasmine blooms when I found him, and the look on his face when he saw me was so soft it made my chest ache. I have to tell you something, I said. Okay, he said, setting down his pruning shears and giving me his full attention. I'm pregnant, I said, and watched his face do several complicated things in rapid succession. Shock, joy, fear, wonder, settling finally into something that looked like devotion made visible. He couldn't finish the sentence. Instead, he crossed to me and pulled me into his arms, holding me like I might evaporate. You've given me everything. Purpose beyond power, a future beyond survival. I'll spend my life earning this. I laughed through tears. I didn't know I was crying. You already have. We told Mia and Luca over dinner that night. Mia screamed and hugged me so hard I couldn't breathe. Luca shook Dante's hand with a solemnity that made him look older than 21. I'm going to be an uncle, he said, wonderstruck. You're going to be a lot of things, Dante said. Starting with the best man at our wedding, I looked at him. Is that a proposal? It's a statement of intent, he said. I'll propose properly later, with a ring, and probably terrible nervousness. But yes, Elena Santos, I'm going to marry you if you'll have me. Yes, I said, because what else was there to say? We married quietly 3 weeks later in the garden with just family. Mia and Luca, Teresa and the staff who'd become something like family. A judge who owed Dante a favor and didn't ask questions. I wore white because I could, and Dante wore a suit that made him look like salvation in expensive fabric. And when he said I do, his voice broke on the words. The pregnancy was easier than I'd feared. Dante treated me like I was made of glass until I threatened to throw things at him, then adjusted to treating me like I was capable, but also carrying something precious. Mia moved back into her own apartment when she started her sophomore year, but visited constantly. Luca got into law school, and Dante cried privately where he thought no one could see. Our son arrived on a Tuesday morning in spring, screaming his displeasure at the world with lungs that suggested he'd inherited his father's stubbornness. We named him Leo, and when Dante held him for the first time, I watched him fall in love all over again, not with me this time, but with this small thing we'd made that was proof you could build something beautiful out of broken pieces. 18 months later, on a Sunday afternoon, the house was full of the loud chaos that means family. Mia and Luca were engaged now, planning a wedding for next summer. Leo was 8 months old and determined to crawl despite his body's insistence he wasn't quite ready. Dante's attempt at legitimacy had been more successful than anyone predicted. 3 new legal businesses, 2 partnerships with companies who didn't ask about his past, 1 feature in a business magazine about the changing face of old families. In his study, where it all began, a framed dollar bill hung on the wall with a small plaque beneath it. The best investment I never made. I found him there that afternoon, watching security footage more from habit than necessity. Leo was asleep against my shoulder, making small noises like a dreaming bird. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked quietly. "Choosing love over empire?" He turned, looked at me, at us, and smiled. "I chose both. Empire means nothing without love. You taught me that." I crossed to him, let him gather us both in his arms. "Where did we begin?" he asked, which had become our private ritual. "In a stairwell," I said, "with 2 stupid boys fighting over my sister." "Before that," he pushed. "In a park," I tried. "With $1 and an insult." "Before that," he said. "I don't know," I admitted. "Me either," he said. "Maybe we've always been beginning. Maybe that's what love is, choosing to begin again every day." Leo woke then, demanding attention with the imperious attitude of someone who'd inherited his father's inability to be ignored. We took him to the greenhouse where night-blooming jasmine still grew wild, where the glass caught sunset and made everything gold. "This is where your story began," I told our son, even though he was too young to understand, where everything changed. Dante held us both, his arms a circle that felt like safety and home, and all the beginnings we'd keep choosing. The dollar bill in his study, the greenhouse flowering around us, the impossible love we'd built from violence and trust, proof that some prices can't be named, only lived. Some things are priceless, and some loves are worth more than empires. Outside the glass, the garden settled into evening. Inside, we stayed wrapped in our own small eternity, and every breath felt like another beginning.